People of Reddit, what was your "oh shit, this person is a psychopath" moment when meeting people? I was friends with a couple. The wife made up an affair with me to hurt the husband's feelings. The husband showed up in my condo with a gun and was detained by the security guards and later the police. I had no idea about any of it until later when the condo security contacted me. Story 2 was dating this dude, 23 Mo, for a few months, and we were getting on really well. Then we both ended up having to move for our jobs at around the same time. He wants to try long distance, so we do. We call most days and watch movies together in our off time. The time zones mess it up a little bit, but it wasn't too bad. Out of the blue one day, he just says he doesn't want to be together. I'm like, wow, okay, a little blindsided, but sure. So I start just going about normal life again and hanging out with friends, the normal post-relationship stuff. After about a month, he begs, like absolutely begs to get back together. Movie-type stuff. Sending flowers to me at work, sending handwritten cards almost daily across thousands of miles, and even bought me a ticket to fly out to see him. So I'm like, okay, whatever, I'll go and see what he has to say. Worst case scenario, I just fly home. So I got a ticket for 2 days after because I just figured I could head out if he was being a penis. He picks me up from the airport and is basically how he used to be, just telling me he missed me and he regretted it as soon as it happened and it was the biggest mistake of his life, the usual. So we stay with his family because he's like, oh, please don't get a hotel. I already feel bad enough about the whole month. Just stay with us. And I just thought, hey, free room, I guess. Everything is completely fine for the first few days. And then I get this alert on my phone and it's a hurricane warning and saying, they're pushing my flight for 4 days later. I'm like, crap, I need to get back to work. I only took like 3 days. When he gets back to the house from work, I tell him about it and he's like, oh, I know. We already started boarding up the windows. I was a little freaked out, but not too much because I guess that's normal for big hurricanes. So the next morning, he shakes me and wakes me up and tells me to come to the living room. I was like, okay. When I do, it's him, his 2 brothers, his sister, his mom, and his dad. People I have only met on this one instance, and he has a binder. They sit me down and each of them reads a passage from the binder of why we shouldn't be together and why I need to move on. And he breaks up with me in his parents' house, in front of his siblings, in the middle of a hurricane power outage. Then, because of the hurricane, I was stuck there for 4 more days with these freaks. Probably not the most psychopath person I've met, but this story is still just so strange to me. I had to post it. Edit. The most psychopathic person was a friend from high school whose whole family peed in the bathtub. The toilet was only for number 2. Story 3. Was chatting away with a guy in a pub. Seemed like a normal, nice dude. Got on really well. Some point in the conversation, he casually mentions he's not long out the jail for torturing a guy. He never said torturing, he said what it was he did to him. He slipped it into the conversation so casually, as if he was telling me about running to the shop for a pint of milk. Never saw it coming. Asked around another day and confirmed he wasn't full of Schmidt. Story 4. My brother. As a kid, he used to enjoy watching animals die. As an adult, there were plenty of moments which reminded me that he was little changed. The scary thing was the complete indifference he would display when you tried to explain why doing stuff like this was wrong. It was like the thing that would normally naturally horrify people over committing such incidents was just completely lacking in him. Story 5. I met the new boyfriend of an acquaintance, and within 10 minutes of the conversation, he was referring to women as holes. It was amazing how I suddenly remembered that my husband had requested I come help him with something. Story 6. She came late to our date, immediately ordered a drink and burger, then told me she was late because of a family thing. Before the burger arrived, she mentioned she'd have to cut our date short because she was having a family dinner. I was like, okay, all good. Then she told me that the craziest thing had happened where her sister met a dude on Tinder, and they ended up going to a family barbecue, and it ended up with them getting married. Before her burger even arrived, she said, wouldn't it be funny to pull a prank on my family? Like, you and me went to my family barbecue and let everyone assume we were really hitting it off, and they'd totally think we were gonna get married. I'll admit, I'm also the psychopath in this story because I went good mashed potatoes. She spent all night introducing me as her future fiance, and I had to take a Tinder break after that. Story 7. At a party in high school or just after it, we were doing late-night juvenile things like truth or dare. I knew most people there pretty well, except the new boyfriend of my friend's sister. I'm not entirely certain how it came up, but he admitted to the entire group that he had sexually assaulted a dog. We were drunk and high, but everyone sobered up with that. We were too young to know what to do with that information, but we all just shut up and quickly left the party. She broke up with him not long after. I can't imagine doing something that awful to a helpless animal, but admitting it to a group of strangers seemed downright sociopathic. I was glad to never see his face again. Story 8. This story makes me angry. So one time, a friend came over and brought a new friend with them. Seemed like a nice guy. He was a quiet and kept to himself. I was a young, single woman and far too trusting of people at the time, I think. So My friend mentions that this guy has just recently got out of prison. I ask him what he went away for. He then proceeds to tell me that he and his friends had followed a young girl into a local park and raped her using various sharp objects they found on the ground. They each got extremely long sentences. His happened to be 12 years. What made everything worse was that he ends the story with the fact that she killed herself because she couldn't live with what they did to her. Needless to say, he was never allowed around my home again, and I had a very stern talk with my so-called friend. Just to clarify, the guy friend. I got rid of him quick sticks, but I felt unsafe and had to do so over a short time period. The fact that he had associated with such scum and that I was a young lady living alone at the time was the reason he only got a stern talking to. Story 9. On my first day at my new job, my coworker told me she traps spiders under glass cups in her bathroom and cranks up the heated floor to cook them alive. Edit. Not a spider expert, so I don't know if this would actually kill a spider. All I know is that she told me she'd leave them there all day and come back to them dead. Story 10. When he just casually mentioned putting a cat in a cage and then putting the cage in water so he could watch it drown like it was no big deal and like it was something everyone has done at least once. Story 11. At a party, once I met a friend of a friend who worked as a nurse at a local hospital. She was of the sort who would sigh heavily and use the unique stresses of her job to bring her the attention she was looking for. She took the spotlight with pleasure and started talking about how hard her job was. When I asked if there were things she liked about her job, she beamed and explained that she worked primarily in maternity. However, her anecdotes had nothing to do with mothers or infants. She spoke primarily of how wonderful it was to be in charge of these women's lives. She explained how fragile they were in those moments, and how even after delivery, she was the only one on the floor for hours who would be able to forecast if there was going to be life-changing complications. She absolutely glowed as she explained how these people's lives were in her hands. The conversation steered in other directions amongst partygoers, but she reclaimed it on the topic of high school experiences. She shared an anecdote on how she was rejected for an advanced choir position and blamed it solely on the poor judgment of the instructor. Years later, she got to sing at the instructor's funeral. I'll never forget the pride she took in having control over other people's lives. It struck me as the most basic display of evil. Story 12. When I turned down a guy while walking back to my car with groceries in hand, and when I got to my car, he pulled up next to mine and kept asking for a hug. I was like, no, in my head, but told him I got a boyfriend. Sorry. He left and I got in my car and kept an eye out to make sure his car wasn't following mine. His van was blacked out too, not trying to stereotype cars, but just made it creepier. I mean, an all blacked out van? Story 13. A few months back, I ended things with a close friend. We had known each other since sophomore year of high school, so we practically grew up together. A little while into our friendship, he was very dependent on relationships, and when they would end, he'd spiral really badly. One relationship in particular made him absolutely crumble. I would help through the grief process, but it became intense, and his need for comfort became suffocating, that even his own mother would call me to comfort her son. And if I had no time or just wasn't comforting enough, he would lash out and yell. He even called me once to show me how he ripped and stabbed his ex's belongings that were left at his house. At that moment, I began to see his true colors. One day we were talking, and I'd brought up a past argument that I thought was funny. He got mad and lashed out saying, "Well, I didn't know it would hurt your feelings." It took me aback, and just something clicked in me that I couldn't have a person like that in my life. Months passed, and I'm approached by a friend who is friends with him. She ends up telling me that he has a police report and has been reported to his college for spreading keep of his ex. It was a shock because I had no idea he had dated a minor. That's when I realized, oh Schmidt, he's a psychopath. Story 14. My friend's fiance went on a rant about how Charles Manson didn't deserve to be in jail because he didn't kill anyone. He just went off with no precursor to the conversation. He started it himself. I tried to ignore him and he kept coming at me and trying to convince me that he was right, and I knew it, but I just wanted to be politically correct. My friend has since passed away and I steer all the way clear of that guy. Story 15. Went on a date once, and she casually dropped how she killed her brother's hamster with perfume as a kid. Basically, she was mad at him, like it was just a quirky little story to laugh about. Needless to say, I started looking for an exit strategy at that point. Story 16. Worked at a university, and a random guy waltzed into my office, sat down, and just started talking as if we were in the middle of a conversation. After about 15 minutes, I told him I had somewhere to be and left the office. He followed, talking the whole time. 5 minutes into walking, he stopped, pulled his pant leg up, and told me about how he shaves his legs, trying to get me to touch them and verify their smoothness. I got a long list of the benefits he sees in shaving, but mid-sentence, he looks down at his watch saying, "Oh my, I'm going to be late. I'm very important and all my friends are here to throw me a party." So I politely said my goodbyes to what I assumed was one of the campus's many homeless inhabitants and went on with my work. About an hour later, I had to go to the political science department for a meeting, but the person I was meeting with wasn't at their office. I went to the main reception area, and the room was packed and decorated with streamers and balloons. Everyone was having cake and talking to none other than my new shaven-legged friend, who had previously been the chair of the department for several decades. Story 17. My friend found a psycho, met her at the bar, and ended up taking her home. She decided it should be more than just a one-night stand and suggested a date the following weekend. He obliges. Their first date was meeting her parents, where she told them how they were going to spend the rest of their lives together, where they were going to buy a house, the names of their 2 children, etc., etc. He dated her for about a month, and after they broke up, she started stalking his friends, not him, his friend. She'd somehow find out where we would be and threaten us with lawsuits for ruining her life. Story 18. I walk my dog at the same time daily. You tend to bump into the same people. Routines and all that. See a woman with a Bernese mountain dog on a rope lead. I've not seen her before, and this dog is at least twice her size, so I'm a bit cautious about opening the gate to the park. Assure myself it's fine, she can control it, and I'm just being needlessly anxious. As I open the gate and go through with my Jack Russell, I watch as the mountain dog bolts towards us barking. The woman holding him gets pulled off her feet and lands on her shoulder hard with a loud groan. Quickly scoop my dog and go back through the gate, slamming it shut behind me, as I can hear this woman yelling over, "It's okay! He's friendly. He just wants to say hello," as this big bastard is jumping up at the gate, barking and snarling. As I back away from the gate, she yells up from the ground, "I'm a fracking Jussie. Don't be such a Jussie, say hello. He just wants to play with your dog." Such a surreal turn of events. I have no idea what the hell was going on with her, or that hellhound, but decided to walk quickly home with my dog and leave her on the ground with the snarling hound at the gate. This was about 3 years ago now, but I still wonder what the heck this woman's plan was. And did she just want me to get attacked, or my dog attacked? Story 19. A kid I went to primary school with invited me to his house after school one day. Not many people talked to him because it was a private school, and he was only a student there because his dad was a groundskeeper. I didn't want to go, but didn't want to be a penis like everyone else. So I said yes, but I couldn't stay long. We went behind his house, and there were several bare spots in the grass. Some of them a single stick sticking up in the middle, while others had a thin plastic tube poking out. He was very excited as he started digging up one of the spots with a hose poking out. He pulled up a jar with a dead baby bird in it. The hose was poked through a hole in the lid to let air in. He went on to tell me he likes burying things alive. Sometimes he seals the jar tight, sometimes gives an air hose, and even puts a little food and water in to keep them alive longer. He said you can't bury them too deep, or you can't hear them trying to escape. Occasionally, he would pour water down the tubes to drown the animal. I was 10 years old at that time. I'm 52 now, and it still makes me sick to think about that. Story 20. One day, I was driving home from work around 3:00 in the afternoon, bright sunny day. I see a man hitchhiking from the one town that is south of my town, so I figure I'll pull over, give the guy a ride. So he jumps in, he's got a knapsack on, throws it in the back, thanks me so much, and off we go. So we're chatting, and he tells me he's trying to hitchhike about a 7-hour drive north of where we are right now. I tell him I can take him about 45 minutes north. All's good. Start asking why he's going there, and he says, oh yeah, he wants to go camping up that way. He's got to retrieve something, and I'm like, oh, that's cool. Okay, what are you going for? He goes, well, the police are after me, and they have been trying to find me for quite a while, but I just keep changing bodies, and that way they can't find me. So I've left a body up near this town, and I'm going to switch into it. And then once I do so, I can hitchhike across the country safely. This guy did not change his voice, change his look. He didn't all of a sudden go, Mr. Super Creepy. It's not like he was trying to fake me out. He said it like it was the most normal thing in the world. So now we are out in the middle of the countryside. I have to keep going until we get to my town before I can get this guy out of my car. Normally, I would have driven through town and let him go on the other side, but I pulled in right downtown, said, sorry, I've got to go into the store. You'll have to jump out here. And I went into the store and waited for him to walk away. Fortunately, he didn't kill me and take my body, or did he? Story 21. My best friend's sister had recently met a new man. She was the kind of woman who had terrible taste in men. She had left a relationship with a wonderful man whom she her first child with. They separated right when she gave birth. She met this man when her son was 6 months old. I was very close with this family. They all went on and on how wonderful this man and how great he treats her and her son. They kept wanting me to meet him. I've had a hard life and met many people in my day. My grandmother used to say, if you never met evil, consider yourself lucky. You will meet lots of people in life and always trust your gut. If you ever meet evil, "You will know it." I never understood what she meant until the day I met this man. My best friend's sister stopped by her other sister house where we happened to be. They called me to come say hello and to meet the new boyfriend. When I came, they introduced him and I shook his hand. I will try and describe the feeling as best I can. The moment I shook this man's hand and looked into his eyes, I felt almost sick, a rush of dread and panic and the feeling of urgency to get away from him all at once. His smile and words and overt friendliness did not match the black cold eyes staring at me. He said very little about himself, no matter the questions I asked. He deflected and answered a question with a question. After he left, my bestie asked what I thought. I replied with, "Do you really want to know?" I said, "He seems nice. Almost too nice and perfect. In fact, if you really want to know, something is off, and I feel like I just met the devil in disguise. She needs to get away from him because that is no man. He's a monster." My friend was like, "You got all that from just meeting him?" I assured her, "It's just my opinion, and I can't explain why my gut just said this man is evil." 2 months later, that man murdered her 8-month-old child. He was angry at my friend's sister for taking her son to his dad and getting Xmas pictures taken with her ex and his family for their Xmas card. He was angry that the baby's grandmother asked her to be in one of the pictures with the family. He killed an 8-month-old child to hurt her because he was jealous of the relationship she had with her son and because she co-parented. Story 22. My ex-boyfriend. He was already abusive and an alcoholic and very toxic, so nothing should have surprised me. But one night we were hanging out and just watching a movie and laughing about something. He went kind of quiet and looked like he was thinking about something. He turns to me and, with a smirk, goes, "You know I could just kill you if I wanted to? There's just something about you. I sometimes just want to kill you. I wonder how I would do it." I broke up with him a few weeks later after I figured out a way to leave without him following me or attacking me. Creepy stuff. Story 23. My ex-fiancé told me that if I were to get pregnant with a girl before a boy, he would push me down the stairs and make me miscarry so we could have a boy first. As many times as it took. We broke up, and afterwards he convinced me to talk things over with him. I got into his car and he proceeded to calmly explain to me that it didn't matter if I took him back or not as he headed to the expressway. I asked him where we were going and he remained absolutely silent. He started gaining speed, but the pitch in his voice never changed when he finally spoke and began a diatribe about our love and how we would be together forever, no matter how many people wanted to pull us apart, and no matter if I saw it yet or not. I again asked him where we were going, and he said a neighboring state where no one would know or find us, with a very creepy smile, one that lives in my mind to this day, but I can't recreate. All very calm. I had to call my mother, and she had to talk him down, beg him to bring me back home. Added bonus, when I was back home and refused to see him, he stood outside my family home through all hours of the night and started singing songs to me over the phone about how he was going to burn my house down and kill everyone inside if I wouldn't go outside and talk to him. Story 24. In high school, I joined a certain group of friends. 2 of the guys were brothers. The younger seemed fairly cool, and one of my girlfriends started dating him later on. The older brother was exceptionally creepy and edgy, slick hair, shades, and a trench coat kind. But he had other reasons that made him a target for bullying, and this creepy persona kept people away from him. He would also send love notes and make comments on all the girls in the group appearances, but we just brushed it off and ignored it because we figured he was trying to be cringe and he was a few years older than us. The younger brother, still dating my friend, dropped out and his mental health was spiraling. He was starting to become extremely possessive, only spent time with his mom and Jeff. He had auditory hallucinations, paranoia, and he started doing a lot of pills and smoking insane amounts of pot his mom gave him. I found out later he was choking my friend regularly and eventually held a knife to my friend's parent. She tried getting him to leave his mom, that environment, get him on the prescribed medication. Surprise, surprise, he was schizophrenic. He refused to give up the drugs or his possessive mom, so my friend left him, thankfully. The older brother started feeding a younger girl acquaintance drugs and alcohol. Another friend who regularly visited their mom went over there. He walked in to see older brother attempting to Ross-P the younger girl. She was drugged, fading in and out. Friend got her out and older brother got his ass beat. I guess him attempting to groom all of the younger girls in the group should have been a warning. He was bad news. A decade later, I get a call from a H's friend. He tells me to look up an article on the local news. The younger brother had a psychotic break. He stabbed a family member to death, hurt a random passerby, and charged the police when they caught up to him. Wild. We knew he was a ticking time bomb, but after he refused X's help and his brother did what he did, we had washed our hands of that family. Story 25. Tried to date a year after my divorce. Very big mistake. We met on a dating site and talked for about a month before I felt ready to meet in person. I don't know what I was thinking, but I invited her to my place to talk, watch a movie, and eat. I told her I wanted to take it slow. I was in no rush, and I had a few medical issues I deal with. So at the time, I only wanted someone to go on dates with and get to know. Well, she wanted to get physical and I respectfully declined. She didn't like that and said she wanted to go, and I said, okay, and I was sorry. I walked her out, and an hour and a half later, it was 1:30, and I heard banging on my door. I opened it and saw 2 cops, and her behind them crying. She called the police stating, I stole her dog during our date. I have too many Aussies had them both since they were puppies. I also have PTSD from the military, and for some reason, me and cops never get along even if I'm nice. So my fault, I got combative, and they wouldn't listen to me till I showed them my phone's pictures. And I had thousands of pictures and videos of my dogs, since they were puppies, and they finally let me show them their dog files with all my vaccinations and vet visits. Thank God my older dog has lots of medical issues, and I keep lots of documentation. The cops escorted her away, and I ended up getting a restraining order, blocked her on everything, and moved to a new place. It scared the schmidt out of me. And my dogs are the only ones who kept me going through my divorce and medical struggles. I stopped dating altogether at this point. I rather learned to love myself and be alone and with my dogs, and no one is allowed to come to my new place. I do see a therapist who is helping me in my journey. She wants me to not give up on dating, but I'm just not ready yet. It has been 3 years since that incident. Story 26. I, through a buddy, met this dude we all called Ranger Dave. He was 100% ex-Army Ranger with multiple deployments in Iraq and Afghanistan, multiple heroic medals, appeared all-round nice kind of guy. I knew him tertiarily on and off. I'd see him driving by or bump into him in the grocery store, coffee shop, etc. He lived in town and, for all outward appearances and actions, was normal. One day walking home from lab, he pulled up to me and offered me a ride home. He knew where I lived and had been there a few times for pre-games or hangouts, whatever. I said sure, hopped in. Ranger Dave and I pulled up to an uncontrolled intersection, a 4-way intersection without stop signs on any side. More of a whoever gets there goes kind of thing. Really easy to navigate, not hard to see every direction. Well, for whatever reason, Ranger Dave lost his schmidt. The poor person who had just pulled up to the intersection before us started to go again as they should have. No issues at all. Ranger Dave floored it. Full throttle Dodge Ram 8 cylinders, smashed the schmidt out of a Toyota Prius, easily 0-45 in less than a second full T-bone smasheroo. He flipped, screaming, veiny neck, monster. I hit my head on the windshield, split my forehead open. Remember, I had just gotten in the truck. No time to put on a seatbelt. I, concussed, noped that scene after making sure it didn't maim or kill the little old lady that had no idea what had just happened. I gave her my info, told her that I had just hopped into his truck seconds before for a quick ride home, then called the police. He just left. I kept seeing him around. Story 27. After moving to a new city a few years ago, my best friend came to visit. We're both 30-something dudes. We were out at a bar when a guy asked to sit with us because there weren't any free tables outside. Fine. Being polite, we start talking to the guy. He told us he was a truck driver, just stopping overnight in town, and at some point mentioned he was ex-military. From there, things began to get strange, but slowly, like the proverbial frog in water being brought to a boil. Not only was he in the military, but he had a brother, that might have been a twin, I can't recall, who was in the CIA, embedded in Russia. My friend and I also gradually got the sense that this guy was a little too interested in us. We eventually closed our tabs and decided to go to a different bar, but the guy stuck with us, telling increasingly tall tales about his time in the military. He eventually confessed that there was no brother. He was the spy who'd been embedded in Russia. What struck me was how even though his stories got more and more ridiculous, his demeanor was deadly serious, if a bit overwrought, and the intensity was starting to make my skin crawl. Not only that, but he was starting to pick fights with other people at the bar, deliberately being belligerent. Over time, he started to radiate this menacing air that hadn't been apparent when we first started talking to him. He didn't get angry directly at us, but it was like he was demonstrating how scary he could be and suggesting we stay on his good side. Finally, he took me aside and slipped into a not very convincing Russian accent. Alas, he was never a spy for the US. He was a double agent, a one-man Russian sleeper cell. But he couldn't bear lying to me. He had to come clean. Even though we had open tabs at the bar, my friend and I waited until the guy went to the bathroom, abandoned our cards, and dipped post-haste. Story 28. Interviewing a crazy rich 16-year-old kid for an internship. His dad was a trustee, and he never broke eye contact or smiled once. I asked about his hobbies, and he said, I run a small import-export business for restaurant equipment, without changing his tone at all. We were told we had to hire him, and yeah, he was just as incompetent and resistant to feedback as you might imagine. ETA, for y'all who just, for some reason, would rather pick at someone's story than just read it. The kid did in fact get expelled from his very high-profile high school. for some gross schmidt he did to another student. He's not just a socially awkward kid. Story 29. I once visited someone's house for dinner, and during the meal, the husband suddenly said, "I think Hitler had the right idea about the Jews," and his wife nodded in agreement. I didn't even react immediately. I was just shocked that someone would actually say that. I guess they were testing the waters. But after my shock wore off, I went right at them, and they clearly didn't like it. I was never invited to visit or speak to them again. Story 30. Not me, but my sister. She was the assistant branch manager for a credit union. The previous manager left and was replaced by Brad. Real name, but he's too stupid to recognize himself in any way. He just wasn't very good at the job. One of those managers who is glued to his chair in his office and talks about how good he is. He was constantly running down his staff. He told my sister that she was abrasive and that staff and customers alike complained about her. He constantly told one of the tellers that she was a bird brain. And what stupid thing did you do today, bird brain? This was in 2020, and he contracted COVID twice in 3 months, in spite of the fact that the branch was drive-through only, and he was strictly work from home. Previously, he had been a regional manager for one of the largest commercial banks in the area. So a branch manager at a small credit union was a definite step down, and my sister wondered about that. My sister applied to a position as a loan officer at the credit union, mostly to get away from him. A few days after she transferred, Brad was fired. Customer complaints and staff trying to leave. My sister was talking to CEO, who was asking if she truly wanted to be in loans or was desperate to ditch Brad. My sister stayed in lending, which she was enjoying. The CEO, female, told my sister that the first time she sat down with Brad to go over his new job, he started talking about how angry he was when his first wife left him and filed for divorce. Brad went through the attic, found her wedding dress and slashed it into little peeves. He was laughing. That showed her. The CEO was sitting there, stunned that he would be telling such a vindictive story with glee the first time he is meeting with his brand new female boss. Yeah, the CEO said, he really had a problem with women. Story 31. My sister's ex. He tried to give my other sister alcohol and convince her to go to a hotel with him. She was 15, co-worker. He comes in and he's tired because he had to take his daughter's cat to the vet. It had been attacked by a fox and nearly died. He complained that he could have saved a lot of money if he just spent 15 cents on a bullet. So he only saved the cat because his daughter would have been upset if it had died. I found out more about him by Googling him, and I am convinced his is secretly a white supremacist as well. Ex-friend told my boyfriend I was cheating on him with 2 other women. Neither of them are gay or bi. I don't know if she made up the lie or got it from someone else. Also wore a white dress and a veil to someone else's wedding. Story 32. I met a guy in middle school. No idea why he made me feel weird. He was cute. All the girls wanted to know him. He gave me just really creepy vibes. I even tried to befriend him because I knew he was being bullied by some guys. We talked, but he was very off. His language about the girls in our class bothered me. I bet she gives good head. I wonder what her mouth feels like. We were like 13. I felt like, why is this dude talking to me about other girls? He never said anything violent, but later I found out he murdered some teen girl. He was 30. Story 33. I was causally dating a guy for roughly 5 months. I moved into a new apartment and had sent him pictures of the interior before I moved. He went on a trip to Scotland and got upset that I wasn't answering his FaceTimes in the middle of the night. I decided I wasn't interested in pursuing anything further because of his persistent pestering and insecurities. I had moved in and was working on unpacking, when suddenly I got a knock at my door. He found where I was living with just a picture of the hardwood floors and some windows. I don't have my location for my photos turned on, so there's no way he could have found it from something simple. He saw absolutely nothing creepy about it and proceeded to push the door and beg me to let him inside. I promptly shut and locked the door, then made sure he heard my shotgun cock. He left, and I haven't heard from him, thankfully. Story 34. This lady had a large dog on a leash in a public parking lot. As my wife and I were walking by, the dog growled and lunged at us. I jumped in front of my wife in case the worst happened, and the lady just laughed at us. Story 35. I, male 31, went on a date with a 28F. Went out on a first date. She showed up an hour late to a date at a nice restaurant. I decided to order when she was 45 minutes late because I assumed she wasn't coming. She was texting me every 10 minutes saying she was 10 minutes away. She shows up drunk. I ask her where she was. She says she was at the bar next door drinking with her ex who happened to be there. She then proceeds to yell at me for ordering food without her. Then continues on to tell me that now that I'm talking to her, I'm not allowed to communicate to women unless she approves it. And if I have friends who are married or have girlfriends, she needs to vet them first before I can continue hanging out with them. I stayed mostly silent while she ranted about being super hot, and no man can handle her. After I finished my meal, I said I needed to go to the bathroom. I left and never came back. I blocked her upon leaving the restaurant and never talked to her again. I've never done anything like that in my life. I always pay for the meal on the first date, but this girl deserved it. Story 36. Went on a date with a guy almost 5 years ago. I had just gotten divorced and was very excited, so I was definitely missing some huge red flags I would never miss now. He told me he had pet turtles as a kid and wouldn't clean their tanks, ever. The water became so filthy that the turtles were just living, breathing infections, to the point their eyes were just gone, swimming around blind, in pain, in their own feces, and he would just watch and basically laugh at them. It was absolutely disturbing. He laughed while telling me this story. I genuinely believe he told this to me because he thought I would also find it hilarious. This was one of many, many red flags from this dude. Ended up being married with kids and everything too. Side note, I have noticed a lot of people saying these random confessions from these psychopaths come up without being prompted, just so randomly. And that's honestly the scariest part. Like, they can literally talk about these things to complete strangers. They are supposedly wanting to impress, hear themselves talking about it out loud, and cannot sense how goddamn batshit crazy they sound. Story 37. When I went on a first date after talking to him for months, he was wearing a hat. On the second date, he had a bandana. I just thought he had a bad haircut or something, but should have asked. Well, he demonic ram's horns tattooed on his skull. He said it was to scare people when he goes back to prison. A few years later, I saw him on the news being arrested, but it was just for protesting. Story 38. A friend of mine got raped by a male friend of hers. The rapist's best friend, let's call him Chode, kept harassing the victim in person and on Twitter, saying she made it up, or if she didn't, she wanted it anyway. I learned a long time ago that you can't present yourself as defending someone who's being bullied, because the asshole will keep up the harassment knowing he is now upsetting two people. So I just deemed him and asked him why he's such a Keep in mind, this guy was raised in Utah, so that word hit hard. He started tweeting about me, and my friend called me and said, "Heretic flags. You can't mess with that Chode guy. He is literally a sociopath. He went to jail for drugging his mom and dad because they wouldn't let him go to a party." She shouldn't have told me that. Another diagnosed sociopath that I grew up with almost beat two of my best friends to death. We ruined his life. Sociopaths don't scare me. They need you to fear them. So I doubled down and made fun of him for drugging his parents. Then he tried to get me fired from my job. Story 39. I live in a nursing home, and yesterday I saw a 60-something-year-old male resident coming out of a much older blind woman's room and asked him if he was lost. He went ballistic, raised his cane in the air, and threatened to bash my head and actually assaulted me with his other hand. And I had to block his attack as I was trying to record on my phone, and assured me that if he decided to hit me, I'd be dead. Psychopath? Very possibly. Actually crazy? No. Just your standard abusive older male asshole. An unfortunate reoccurrence in my life thus far. I had PTSD flashbacks and nightmares all night in which my stepfather's face and this guy's were intertwined as they were beating the schmidt out of me. Decided to call the non-emergency police number this morning to report it because management isn't in until Tuesday, and that's just too far away. They're going to come talk to him, and I'll be sleeping with my bedroom door locked until further notice. Story 40. Worked at a customer's house, and we were chit-chatting and getting along all right. He was a recently retired cop and a bit strange, but nothing alarming. I'm in a lot of homes. Everyone's a little bit strange in their own ways. We got on the subject of annoying pets, and he started talking about how his ex had a cat that would constantly bother him. Loud meows, scratching furniture, rubbing against his leg. Normal cat stuff. So he pinned it in a corner and stabbed it several times with a Bowie knife, then buried it in the crawl space and told his ex that it ran away, talking about the funny sounds it made. He was laughing and feeling nostalgic about this story, like it was just good times. I still had 5 hours of work left in the day, so I gave it a giggle and an "oh Schmidt" changed the subject as smoothly as I could. Older people seem to be fine with brutally killing animals for any reason. I understand killing animals. I've done it. But the idea is to only do it for food or defense, not for fun, because you want to hear it squeal. Story 41. My cousin introduced us to his new GF. I found her quiet, but my wife immediately got bad vibes from her. There were several things that seemed odd. She had no sense of humor. She never expressed emotion. She seemed calculating, but without saying much. As months went on, cousin announced that he was going to marry the GF. My wife didn't say anything to him, but kept telling me that the marriage was a mistake and the girl was bad. Cousin brought his fiancée to our house, and within 15 minutes, the GF developed a tremendous migraine, and they had to leave. This happened 2 to 3 times. They finally married. Huge, expensive ceremony. Wife kept saying that the marriage was a mistake, and that the girl was bad. Fast forward 6 months, cousin came to our house on a Saturday morning. The girl had been cheating since they got married, and he had just found out. A year later, I'm listening to a podcast on NPR by the author of a book on psychopaths, called Cousin, and suggested he read the book. He did. Called me later to say that of the 12 or so telltale signs of a psychopath, she had exhibited 11. Story 42. Met a guy named Dennis. He had some sort of system for dating, and long story, but it ended up with me at a carnival, watching a man named Dr. Tobaggan drop some condoms on the ground he used for his magnum dong. Also, his sister got stabbed that same day. Story 43. Seemingly normal girl walked up to me in an otherwise shady part of town, making idle chit-chat. I assumed she was working her way up to bumming money or something, but she didn't appear to have a gun, and I was with my 90-pound pit bull, so I was comfortable enough shooting the breeze for a while, until she casually glanced down at him and said, "Des your dog?" "Huh? Did you say damn dog? What does that mean?" She nodded coyly. "Mm-hmm. You know, a dog you. I got one like that and he eats my Jussie, blah, blah, blah." And she casually went into explicit detail about her bestial shenanigans with some pet. She abused, pleasured, while I stared at her and waited for her to burst out laughing. Or maybe Ashton Kutcher pop out from behind a car with a video camera pointed at my face. But no, she was just a girl, telling another girl, a stranger no less, the most unhinged and depraved stuff imaginable. And she did not appear to be on any kinds of drugs, although she probably should have been. Story 44. I was talking to a guy on Bumble. I live in NY, very near to where the LI serial killer lived, and Gilgo Beach is 20 miles from me. But mind you, there's dozens of beaches around me. As we were messaging at 1 a.m., I kept getting these vibes. I thought maybe it's just me being dramatic. I explained how beautiful it is, and I'm sitting outside enjoying the weather. He asked me if I've ever been to the beach at night. I'm like, not in a long time. He says, "I'd love to take you to Gilgo Beach late at night. You would never want to leave and you could stay there forever." I'm like, wait, Gilgo Beach? You couldn't have said any other beaches? You understand why that seems a bit concerning? Hoping he was joking. He said, "Well, if you don't want to go willingly, it won't be as beautiful." Meanwhile, I'm searching on Bumble to report him, and he had deleted his account, so I blocked him. This was just last week, so yay. For online dating, LOL. Story 45. 2 different boys I knew told me with glee how they hurt animals. In grade school, Ben told me how he put sewing pins in bread chunks to feed to seagulls. In high school, Chetty described how he buried a cat alive. I didn't stay in contact with either, so no idea if they ended up as a true crime special. Story 46. I have a coworker who is insane and says wild things on almost a daily basis. Recent highlights include 1. Bragging about stealing a car, proudly declaring she won't sleep with a man who showers regularly. She needs them to stink. 3. Weekly stories of road rage altercations on her way to and from work. Sounds like they've been escalating recently too. 4. Buying into almost every wild conspiracy theory you can think of. Defending famous adult men who are sexual predators. Because, quote, "If I were a 13-year-old girl, I would totally be throwing myself at him too. So I don't really consider that a victim. That's something I really would have wanted at that age." To top it off, she said almost all of these things in front of very important clients. I truly don't understand how she still has a job. Like I said, these are just recent occurrences and only scratch the surface. My fellow coworkers and I are constantly in awe of the schmidt that comes out of her mouth. Story 47. So my cousin told me this wild story about what happened at her job. She had a coworker who seemed fine at first, but over time, his behavior started to raise serious red flags. He was incredibly charming and seemed to get along well with everyone, but it quickly became clear that he was using his charm to manipulate people. He would take credit for others' work, sabotage team projects to make himself look better, and even leak confidential information to competitors. One time, he intentionally messed with presentation equipment and files, just to undermine a colleague, and then took credit for saving the day. Eventually, after a series of incidents, HR had to step in. They couldn't disclose specific details about his condition due to confidentiality, but they did reveal that his behavior was linked to a serious personality disorder. They fired him, and the whole team was left in shock. My cousin said it was a real eye-opener and made everyone more cautious about who they trusted in the workplace. Story 48. When I got in first couple art classes in second year of high school, there was a girl that had same niche interests as me that in my country isn't very popular. We had a couple classes sitting and chatting together, and I noticed that she was really entering my private space and pushing boundaries, but I'm a person with very open boundaries, so I didn't bat an eye and was chill about it. After we exchanged Twitter pages, her was private, I found out that she is the bad type of quiet kids. Her full page was blasting with arts, fan fiction, and love to several real-life serial killers like Jeffrey Dahmer, Ted Bundy, etc. I got creeped out, unfollowed her immediately, and for the rest of high school, I tried to be cold but polite. There was another couple strange and worrying stories with her so well. I guess it's good that we didn't become friends that on pity, that she was the only RL person that was into same fandom as me. Story 49. I'm a 16 years male and my stepsis is 11. She once came home with a boy. I asked who he was and she told me to shut up. They went in the room to play with my monitor and I gave them my Steam password. I was watching on the TV in the living room, and I heard her scream in terror. I ran into the room, and he was on top of her doing, you know. I jumped, kicked him, and beat him up. I asked why he did that, and she was crying and saying that he wanted to know what it's like to have keks. I never let her near a boy without knowing his intentions first. Story 50. A guy tried to stab my ex-boyfriend in the shoulder because he went to grab him and cut his hand on my ex's punk vest spikes. They had known each other years, but it was my first time meeting him. They weren't friends but shared friends, and my ex always tried to avoid house parties with him because he was always worked up and looking for a fight. My ex was pissed, but luckily his leather jacket took the brunt of it. That guy later died from a heart attack, brought on in a note a few years later. I've had other experiences too, more casual ones, like the guy who didn't like that. I turned him down at a bonfire and made a joke about tossing me in the river with all the other native women. Thinking over it, these moments have been predominantly situations with men. I've met some really rough and weird guys over my life, mostly at house parties and passing. Story 51. Was walking my dog down a main road. On lead, a lady was walking her dog off lead. Her dog stopped in the road, causing cars to stop. She had no control of it. Her dog lunged for my dog. I asked her to put her dog on a lead. She said she will stamp on my dog's head and let her dog kill mine. I knew it wasn't even worth arguing with crazy, so I carried on my walk. She then set her house on fire 2 weeks later, with her children inside. Luckily, they were okay, but yeah, madness. Story 52. My ex-wife used to endlessly badmouth her grandparents, who themselves also did her. You'd think they were mortal enemies, only overnight for them to gang up on and turn on me. I still can't believe how double-crossing and backstabbing people can be. Story 53. Hooked up with an older woman when I was 25 and just out of a long-term relationship. I could tell she got feelings immediately, and so I broke it off because that's not what I was looking for. A couple months later, she gets arrested for hitting her boyfriend over the head with a frying pan. Really dodged a frying pan with that one. Story 54. I was at a party playing beer pong, and some dude came up to me and my buddy, then asked if we knew what it was like to kill a man. Obviously, we said no, but laughed it off, thinking he was just drunk like we all were. Then his eyes changed. He said something about power or whatever, and I slipped away. Talked to someone else at the party who knew that guy, and he said, yeah, he was in the Marines, and he was never right after coming back. Probably wasn't born a psychopath, but unfortunately became one in the desert. Story 55. Before I was prescribed the right psych meds, I used to do a lot of armed robberies, robbed a lot of drug dealers, carjacked numerous people. I don't know if I fit this description though because I was in my 20s with manic bipolar, highly violent tendencies, and I feel bad about what I used to. I got what was coming to me. I was shot point blank in my right calf and stabbed in the neck. Story 56. When my husband's ex-best friend would secretly record his one-night stands and showed everyone at work. We were in the army, and mind you, this man had about 4 to 7 different women a week. One time we came over his place, he was with a girl. Then we left and came back that same night. He was with a different girl. He would also drug his dog for fun. Dog is with ex-GF now. Oh, and he cheated on his 3-year GF the entire relationship with the females in our unit. GF was also our co-worker. Met her and family. Her dad loved him, but little did they know. I could go on about this guy. He's under investigation now. Story 57. I was helping a friend after she had an outpatient surgery, but still needed eyes kept on her just in case. Her boyfriend at the time started talking with his friend that he invited over knowing she was having this surgery about raping her and how she wouldn't know any better because of the drugs. Also, they talked about stealing her pain pills. They thought I couldn't hear them talking in the living room, but I don't know if it would have made a difference if they knew I could hear them or not. I did not leave her side until I knew she was fully conscious. When I told her what he said, she wasn't even surprised and sent me home. We are no longer friends for different reasons. Story 58. My brother. Absolutely psycho and sociopath. Manipulative, abusive, uncaring for humans or animals, egotistical behavior, enjoys inflicting pain onto others. When we were little, I knew he was not right. We didn't have language or words to describe it. It took my mom several decades to finally cut ties with him. Backstory. We had an older brother die at 14 from suicide. My idiot brother used that to his advantage towards my mom to get whatever he wanted. She ended up finally saying no to him about 10 years ago. Now he's trying to wiggle his way into our lives. A no-contact order won't keep him away. He hurt us for entertainment. He has a darkness in him I can't explain. Story 59. I had always looked at it as an embellishment, big fish, quirk thing, but the way my dad could lie so easily and efficiently about literally anything. I came home once to help him with some renovations they were doing. He told me to grab something from his office. There was a calendar with a chemo schedule on it. I asked if he had cancer. He said no. I asked again. No, why would you think so? I saw a chemo schedule in your office. Yeah, I got cancer. Pretty much lied about everything. A lot of other big things. I eventually got off contact. Started talking to him again about 6 months before he died. Regret doing so, found out a lot more serious lies after he died. Story 60. When my ex's dad told the story of the time he put a wet towel on top of an anthill and then threw the towel at my ex. The wet towel stuck to her skin and she was immediately covered with ants who bit her all over her body. He was laughing when he told the story, like it was the funniest prank. My ex told him that it actually hurt a lot and it traumatized her quite a bit, and he just said, well, I'm okay because I already asked God for forgiveness. Story 61. First day at work, went into a department that wasn't mine. Next thing I know, the person that was there with the section manager went and reported me for talking about my wages, which is not allowed, as well as some other Schmidt. Really got them to believe things I had not done. Got them back, though, in my own way, without deceiving anyone. Story 62. I was homeless for a few months in 2008. To pass the time some days, I read a wide variety of books from the local library. One night, sitting in a bed at the shelter, the guy who got the one next to mine that night asked about a book I was reading. It was about the history of Christian martyrs. He asked to borrow it, I thought. Sure, why not? Soon as I give it to him, he mentions how much he gets off on this kind of stuff. Torture, death, etc. I made sure to avoid him from that day onwards. Story 63. This kid I knew casually started joining me one day in my walks home from school. One day we were all goofing off, and he ended up jokingly putting a Bowie knife to my throat. I never looked at him the same after that. Story 64. My ex accidentally confessed she cheated on me. I said I'm leaving then. She put a scissors to her neck and said if I leave, she will unalive herself. I ended up comforting her on the kitchen floor while she cried. I removed the scissors from her hand, and as I was doing that, I thought to myself, oh Schmidt, this person is a psychopath. I sneaked out when she slept off and called her brother to check on her immediately. Story 65. First year of college, I passed a guy on my way to my dorm. He stopped me for a convo. I wasn't interested, so I politely said no. Thank you to hanging out or giving him my number. It took me 5 more minutes to make it up to my room, and I checked my phone and he found my IG and requested to follow me. All in the span of 5 minutes. After I declined interest, I didn't even give him my full name, only my nickname, DK Howteep. He found it so fast, or why he thought it was a good idea to follow me at all. Story 66. Just some guy in my hometown. While walking our dog, she was attacked by another dog, and its owner was just standing there and smirking until I chased his dog away. I reported it, and the dog was put down because it had also tried to attack children who were sitting in a car. Our dog luckily wasn't hurt too severely, but she did have a fear whenever we encountered big dogs after that. Ironically, it was another big dog who cured her of that. Anyway, I later learned that they found burn marks on the dog, because apparently its owner put out their cigarettes on it. Story 67. It was an Uber driver. My wife and I took an Uber down to the bars one weekend. Once he picked us up, I could easily tell he was on something. While we were crossing a bridge on the interstate, about halfway to our destination, he says, "Isn't it crazy that I could swerve off the road and kill us all right now?" I told him to get off on the next exit and canceled the ride. I also reported him to Uber, so hopefully nobody has to get in a car with that lunatic again. Story 68, immediately after making me defend myself for being white. Well, at least I'm not white, because I'd like to have a family someday that won't kill each other, said while pursuing a romantic relationship with me, a white man. Story 69. A guy who lived up the street from I was always doing bad Schmidt when we were kids. Stealing, fighting, selling drugs, you name it. This kid did it. He stole my bike on day, my dad had to get it back. Fast forward 15 years, I hear he's been arrested. Turns out, he got into an argument with a professional football player in a club. He chased the football player down and killed him on the street. Story 70. When I was over at SB 22, met a guy who would just sit there and menacingly sharpen a pencil. Didn't matter what was going on. He would just sharpen a pencil. He's no longer with us. But man, I miss that. Story 71. I politely rejected a man's advances after pressing me. I blurted out, "Look, I'm gay," jokingly added that he was barking up the wrong tree. He kept harping on the fact that lesbianism was a figment of my imagination, and if given the chance, he could remove it from me, not even shake it out of me, which I've heard before. But he specifically said, remove it. He was in the medical field, ironically enough, so it definitely scared the Schmidt out of me. It was giving underground lobotomy vibes. Story 72. New girl started at my job. Very normal conversations and whatnot until she goes missing a few days later. Girl staged her own kidnapping to see if her boyfriend truly loved her. Apparently, drove herself to nearby city, ran to a house, and told the PPL she escaped her trunk. Police came to question here, and the story didn't add up, leading to her confession. Hope her BF got far away as possible. Story 73. My brother's stepdaughter spilled some juice or something as I was looking right at her, and then blamed her baby brother. I mean, I know kids do that, but the insistent way she lied about right to everyone's face, while I repeatedly told her I'd been looking right at her when it happened, made me think she was a sociopath. A few years later, my brother told me she was indeed a sociopath. Story 74. Lived under an Eastern European family once. One of the older sons showed up to my housewarming party. Jacked on steroids, threatened my friends, banged some chick in my new bed, pissed on my mattress, and disappeared. Showed up the next day with some friends and a bag of cocaine to make up for it, got naked and dry humped. One of his friends, ironically, never seen that guy again after. Story 75. I met a dude online as I was trying to make some new friends after I moved cities. We liked a few of the same bands. He suggested we go to see a band he liked. Cool. At some point after the show, he mentions hating cats and wanting to stomp on them. I mentioned how disturbing that was, and that was the last time we spoke. Story 76. An old friend of mine had a bad drinking problem, and he told me he drove home drunk. When I tried asking him about why he didn't see the problem, with that, he said, "Why does it even matter if someone dies? There's 7 billion other people in the world." Story 77. When he got mad because I wasn't going to continue to argue with him about something stupid. He was one of those people that will until you agree with him, and I'm not about that. Then proceeds to tell me that I'm abandoning him because I had to take care of my very sick son. Mind you, I'd been on one date with this man. Story 78. I was friends with some old guy from work. We used to talk in English despite being Mexican, and used to eat lunch together. He then decides to share with me he married his wife when he was 40, and she was 13. I said out loud out of shock, "Que puto asco," docking gross. I hated his guts after that and told him with everyone I could. Story 79. Walking my dog. We walked by someone's house with dogs, and they went batshit crazy barking. Then, the owner started screaming and cussing one-sided conversation, saying my dog set them off. Came at me, ready to hit me, and I maced him. My dog never made a sound. We weren't the problem. Story 80. Had this girl I remembered from elementary school. She started working at my job, and we got kind of close. She told me as one of the first few person that knows that she was prig, and I was like, wow, congrats. Then I remembered her saying her BF is stuck with her now that she's carrying their child, and I'm just like, Story 81. My sister says she understands other people's point of view, i.e. their feelings and how she's hurt them, and simply doesn't care, and would do something she wanted even if it hurt someone's feelings. I realized in that moment she had zero empathy and was a cruel person. She enjoys hurting people's feelings, making them suffer and watching them cry. Story 82. My first husband came home on Christmas Day drunk and high. He confessed to me that he was disappointed that all the abuse he had been giving me hadn't caused me to unalive myself yet and to hurry up because he wanted to find my body. I noped out of there that day. I'm still alive and it's been 24 years. Story 83. Match with this girl on Tinder and we're talking and mentioned she has to leave for her night class. I asked what she was studying and she responded with anger. As it turns out, her night class was court-mandated anger management classes she got for retaliating against her abusive ex-boyfriend. Story 84. Had to fight for the steering wheel as my mother told me she was just going to kill us both and drove into oncoming traffic. That one will stick with you. She's now begging me to come live and take care of her. Yes, that is what crazy looks like.